Hello everyone and welcome to Little C's podcast. We Little C's are a non-profit organization that was established in 2024 and is operated solely by high school students. So let's get started by sending it over to Sasha.
The silence of the archive. In the heart of a bustling city, the National Historical Archive stood as a monument to the past, its towering walls housing centuries of history. The archive was often quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of paper or the low murmur of researchers lost in time. It was a place where one could feel the weight of history in the air, and for most people, it was a sanctuary of knowledge. But for Dr. Elena, it had become a prison. Elena, a historian in her mid-30s, had worked at the archive for almost a decade. Her passion for history was undeniable, yet in recent years she had begun to question the value of the work she did. The endless hours spent cataloging old documents, restoring fragile manuscripts, and compelling data seemed increasingly meaningless. The silence that once inspired her had become oppressive, and the walls of the archive had begun to close in on her. One rainy Thursday afternoon, as she sat in the dusty corner of the reading room, Elena discovered something unusual. A letter hidden inside an ancient manuscript, one that had been catalogued years ago but never examined closely. The letter, written in ink that had faded but not completely disappeared, was dated from 1941. It was addressed to a woman named Isabel, a name Elena had never encountered in the vast records of the archive. The contents of the letter shook Elena. It was a personal letter, not the kind of official document typically found in the archive. The writer, a man named Alexander, described in poignant detail a forbidden love affair with Isabella, a woman he could never marry due to the societal pressure of the time. The letter spoke of dreams, of shared moments in hidden corners of the city, and of a love that had to be hidden from the world. But the most striking part of the letter was the ending, where Alexander begged Isabella to meet him one final time before he had to leave for the front lines. Elena felt an unexpected connection to the letter, as if it were speaking directly to her own sense of entrapment and longing. The idea of a secret, a love that could not be, fascinated her. She wondered why such a personal letter had ended up in the archive. There was no mention of its historical significance, no reason for it to be preserved alongside the rest of the documents. Was it an accident, or had someone deliberately placed it there? Determined to uncover the story behind the letter, Elena spent the next few days digging through records of the 1940s. She found no mention of an Alexander or Isabella, but she found something that caught her attention. A list of names of prominent figures involved in the city's cultural and political scene during the war. One name stood out: Isabella de France, a well-known socialite and philanthropist. She had been married to a wealthy industrialist but was rumored to have been involved in a scandalous affair before her mysterious disappearance in 1942. As Elena dug deeper, she found more fragments of Isabella's life. But the more she learned, more questions arose. The affair with Alexander seemed to be real, but the details of Isabella's disappearance remained a mystery. What had happened to her? Why had no one spoken about her since the war? Was the letter from Alexander truly a love letter, or was there something darker at play? Late one evening, as Elena was reviewing a newly uncovered diary from one of Isabella's close friends, she stumbled upon an entry that made her blood run cold. The entry described a meeting between Isabella and a man named Alexander, but it was not a romantic rendezvous. Instead, it described a secret meeting in which Alexander, terrified for his life, had asked Isabella to help him escape the country. The diary entry ended abruptly with the words, "I never saw him again." Shaken, Elena began to question the true nature of the letter. Had Alexander been in danger? Had he survived the war? And most unsettling of all, Had Isabella disappeared because of her connection to him? Elena's obsession with the story deepened, and she began to feel that she, too, was trapped in an unrevealing mystery. Her work, which had once seemed like a purpose, now felt like an endless cycle of empty tasks. The line between her professional and personal life blurred as she sought answers that seemed to slip further away with each discovery. In the final days of her research, Elena made a decision. She would travel to the small town where Isabella had last been seen, a place isolated from the world, where secrets had been buried for decades. As she stood in the train platform, staring at the foggy landscape stretching before her, Elena realized that the silence she had once feared was not an enemy. It was a companion, one that guided her through the labyrinth of history. In the town, Elena visited Isabella's former house, which was now abandoned and overgrown. There, in the attic, she found a collection of letters and photographs, one of which was a picture of Isabella and Alexander together, smiling in front of a cafe in the city. It was a moment frozen in time, untouched by the horrors of war. The discovery was bittersweet. Elena understood now that history, like people, was not always meant to be fully understood or solved. Some stories, she realized, were designed to remain incomplete. Elena returned to the city, her heart heavy with the knowledge that some things, some truths, can never be fully uncovered. But in accepting the mystery, she felt a sense of release. The silence of the archive no longer felt like a prison. It was, instead, a place where forgotten stories could be remembered, where even the most fleeting moments of the past could echo through time.
Thank you so much for listening all the way through. We hope you found this episode helpful and enjoyable. If you did, be sure to tune in for next one. Until then, take care and see you soon.